and thank you so much for joining me on Culture Chat today.
My pleasure, Mimi.
I am, well, first I need to apologize because I might be a little too excited during this interview because I am a huge fan of your work.
Oh, thank you.
um, I'll give you a little backstory. My husband, he actually got really jealous because one day I came in and I said, I need to tell you, I'm in love with a rabbit named Usagi Yojimbo. He
Hmm.
he is such an endearing character, and I know this is a really big and important year because my boyfriend Usagi is going to be 35. This is his 35th
Yes, he
anniversary.
is.
Yeah, that
I've
must
been
be
doing this. I've been doing Usagi since 1984, so yeah, a long time.
a long time. Yeah, so you know him well.
Mhm.
Well, one of the things I find really fascinating that in addition to creating this character, you write the story, you do all the artwork by hand, you letter, you shade, and you've been doing this pretty much for the last 35 years.
Yes.
And I know that you must have had several offers of artists and writers that are just dying to work with you. So why do you feel it's so important for you to do every aspect of the comic yourself, even today?
Oh, I love writing. I love drawing. I love working with the character, and we have had talks with other artists, but nothing ever came of it. There was even a series that um, we had proposed with Diana Schutz, my old editor at Dark Horse, to do a miniseries called Usagi Yojimbo Kagemusha,
Mhm.
in which other artists would draw and write my characters. So that sounded really fun for me. However, we got distracted by other projects, and that never took off. However, I love seeing other people's interpretations of Usagi.
Yeah, I noticed. Because I'm an avid reader, I do notice at the end sometimes people submit submissions of their
Yeah.
artwork of all different ages, and you always show such appreciation for
Mm-hmm.
all the artists' interpretations. It is a really incredible character, and I can see you enjoy it, which is why I guess you do still do it. But I mean, it's safe to say then, as a child, you were really good at coloring, and you really liked art. Yes.
I did, yeah.
Did you always grow up wanting to be an artist and storyteller?
Ah, when I started thinking about a profession, then yeah, it was no doubt that I wanted to do something in the arts. But growing up in Hawaii, I mean, that's as far away from the comic book scene as you could get at that time. So I figured I'd do work in advertising or something. And it wasn't until um, I guess Jack Kirby moved to the East Coast away from the New York scene that people started or artists started moving in other parts of the country and still worked in comic books. And then when I came up to LA, I mean, there was a whole group of comic book artists there that I got to meet, and I eventually became a part of the comic book scene.
And growing up, you enjoyed reading comics as well.
Oh yeah, yeah,
What
enjoyed
were,
comics and enjoyed movies.
yes, what were some of your favorite comics growing up?
You know, my favorite character was Spider-Man.
Uh,
I remember when that first came out in the 60s, and Spider-Man and Batman were always my two favorite.
oh, that's interesting. You picked one from each universe. Yeah, I can see. It's. I've listened to some of your interviews, and I know you also really loved samurai movies growing up. Was
Mm-hmm.
obviously, an influence in your work. But you said growing up in Hawaii, I've heard you mention that there was always like a movie theater, like a cultural, like samurai movies, and you got to see those a lot as well.
Exactly. I lived in an area called Kapahulu, just off at the base. Well, it's at the base of Diamond Head, and it's not longer there, no longer there. But the old Kapahulu Theater was just walking distance from my house, and every weekend they show chambara, samurai movies, and so I saw a lot of the old Toshiro Mifune movies. Also those chapter movies like Satomi Hakkenden, where every week they show a different chapter of the story of that or Golden Peacock Castle, and I love those. Every week I was there, and it was only a quarter to get in. So at
Oh,
that time, it was kind of for a kid, it was still pretty expensive.
and now, how old were you when you watched those movies?
Oh, I'd say my parents were taking me to the old movies when I was maybe 5 years old. So
Wow.
from then on, I guess the heyday when I used to go every week was about when I was 10.
Okay. I mean, um, I'm a martial artist actually, so I grew up
Oh,
doing
uh-huh.
kung fu, and so kung fu
Mhm.
movies were my thing. But and I teach kung fu for a living
Oh,
actually. So
neat.
yeah, and so for me, I completely grew up in that environment as well. But I know a lot of people would go, "Wow, weren't those movies a little violent for a young child? They didn't give you any nightmares, or it was just more exciting."
No, we didn't think about things like that back then. I mean, it was just great movies.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if you got some nightmares, well, that's just the price you pay.
You
But
just have to get your samurai sword from by your bed.
exactly,
Did
yeah.
you have a toy samurai sword growing up?
Oh, I don't think so. We used sticks and things.
Well, that
I mean, and
counts.
my
That
parents
counts.
were around and watching us, so back then they don't care.
And what was that like for you growing up in Hawaii?
At that time, well, the Japanese population made was the majority of the voting population of Hawaii. So they brought the culture with them, and so I grew up with the Obon festivals. Most of the my classmates were Asian, and it was it was nice. It was fun, and growing up in Hawaii was great. I mean, I didn't own a pair of shoes till I was intermediate or junior high, what you call here, and that's because it was mandatory. But we just walked around all over the place, and yeah, we had growing up in Hawaii was great at that
Yeah.
time.
Was a lot of swimming and fishing and island life activities as well?
Yeah, pretty much, and we just took it for granted. I mean, Hawaii was just home for us. We didn't know anywhere else, and at that time, traveling to the mainland was a big thing. So
Right, right, of course,
we
of course.
hardly ever did it.
Yeah, I imagine. Did you island hop as well?
I used to spend summers in Kauai, a couple of weeks in Kauai, because my dad's family was there. So I
Okay.
spent time with relatives, my cousins and such.
It sounds like you had a really nice, growing up family unit, and you seem
Hmm.
very connected to your Japanese heritage. And
Oh
that
yeah.
obviously shows in Usagi as
Hmm.
well, almost like an homage. But what I really love about your work is your attention to detail
Hmm.
and the architecture, food, clothing, the history and traditions. It's actually been really educational for me. I mean, I love samurai movies as well, but
Hmm.
I really have enjoyed reading your stories because I feel like at the end of each one, I've learned a new folk tale or a new character that
Hmm.
I've never heard of. Of course, we just
Hmm.
know samurais, and
Right,
so it's
right,
been
right.
really amazing. And I know that you do extensive research for your books, and I even understand you've been so detailed. You've gone back and corrected things that readers might have told you, hey, that
Hmm.
board game you did wasn't
Yeah.
quite
Hmm.
correct, and so you're really big on attention detail. Is that correct?
Well, I learn a lot from my research as well, and so I just like to pass that along. Right now, I'm working on this three-part story called Bunraku about the puppet theater, which is the Japanese puppet theater is very different from the Western style. The Western style is more Punch and Judy, comical, whereas the Japanese type of puppetry is dramas,
Okay.
and those dramas can last like a 14-hour show.
Wow.
And so, I'm doing research about that. Like I said, I doing a story about actually it's a haunted puppet theater. So I'm
Oh,
having lots of fun with that.
I'm sure. I know some of
Hmm.
your characters can get a little scary, even for
Yeah.
me. I'm going to pronounce all your characters wrong, so my apologies in advance. My Japanese is non-existent. So, but the
Hmm.
really scary character for me is always Jay or Jai or
Oh, Jay.
Jay. Yeah, he's scary. So I can imagine you're going to bring some authenticity to this puppet theater.
Yeah, I'm doing some research, and it's fascinating. It's like I said, it's very different from um, the puppetry in West, and also very different from the other types of entertainment in Japan. So I'm having lots of fun with that.
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
amazing. I can't wait to read it. I
Actually, this story was inspired by my friend Sergio Aragonés, who does Gru the Wanderer,
Okay, yes.
because he said, "Oh yeah, he went to a puppet theater in Japan. It's you should do something about Japanese puppetry." And for the past years, oh yeah, yeah, I'll get to it eventually, and I'm finally at that point.
Well, I always find it kind of amazing that each story arc and each, I mean, sometimes you have longer arcs and sometimes you just
Hmm.
have like a quick snippet, which is amazing, but it never gets old. Like there are always new stories and new things to share. And like now you said, this is the first time you're exploring this area. I mean, since you've been the sole creator, and I guess this is where you get some of your inspiration, people give you ideas, but do you
Hmm.
ever get writer's block? Because all of your series and all of your, comics are so entertaining and they're just
Hmm.
always fresh, so
Hmm.
I wonder.
I do get writer's block, but it's also the case where each story seems to be a springboard for another story. And as you said, I've done Usagi continuously since I started from 35 years ago. So I see this as one long single narrative. It's the story of his life. With when if other artists or other writers would come in, they pretty much reboot the series. And it's happened so many times. I mean, Superman's been rebooted a lot, Batman, but Usagi is just one continuous story, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, that is amazing, actually, because you're
Mhm.
right. Most of our other quote unquote superheroes or characters, not
Mhm.
only do they get passed around to different artists and different writers, which, of course, has
Mhm.
its own
Right,
positives, of
and
course.
each creative team has their own take
Yes,
on
definitely.
that character. But with Usagi, I'm the writer and the artist,
Yes.
so I can look back at stories I've done like 20 years ago, and I'm also thinking of stories that I'm going to be doing like 10 years from now and
Wow.
laying groundwork for that.
Really?
Hmm.
So do you just like have a big notebook and jot down ideas as they pop into your head so
No,
you
it's
don't
pretty
lose them?
much out of my head.
Oh,
I do have a notebook that I write down specific stories about, do the breakdowns and outlines. However, the overall direction of Usagi is pretty much just in my mind, such as I just finished a 7-issue story arc called The Hidden about the early Christians in Japan. And that would eventually lead up years and years from now to uh, 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 the Shimabara Rebellion, where thousands of Christians were massacred by the Japanese and the Dutch in Japan in the Nagasaki area.
hmm.
And again, this is something that won't happen maybe for maybe another 10 years. However, I'm just laying down groundwork for that. And I eventually plan to go to Nagasaki just to do the research around that area.
Wow, that's amazing that you're thinking so far
Yeah.
ahead. But it makes sense because your stories
Mm-hmm.
really just kind of flow into each other. And I actually, I'm here in the U.S., of course, also in Florida. And as a kung fu teacher, I interact with a lot of kids and I teach a lot of kids. And I always think that the education system needs to kind of like shift and adjust. And I feel like your stories would actually be great for anybody who wants to learn about like Japanese history. And I just find it would be more
Mm-hmm.
interesting for kids to learn in this fashion because you really do go way in with the research. And like you said, you're
Well,
even going to go back to
usagi has
Japan.
been used in the classroom,
Oh,
such
that's
as grass
fantastic.
cut. Yeah, grass cutter has was used as a textbook for Japanese history classes at the college level.
Really?
And grass cutter begins with the creation of the mythological creation of the Japanese islands, and it follows the sword grass cutter throughout history until it was lost at uh, during the Genpei Wars at the Battle of Dan no Ura Straits. However, most of my stories are pure fantasy, but a lot of them are rooted in Japanese traditions, customs, mythology, and history.
Yes, yes, because you always write after the episode, after the story, you always write kind of like
The
this
story
character, a
notes.
little
Yeah.
story notes, and that's
Yeah.
been so insightful. But yes, of course, Grass Cutters, you're
Mm-hmm.
one of the most amazing arcs. But and of course, you've won a lot of awards, so
Mm-hmm. No,
congratulations, and you continue
Yeah,
to.
Grass Cutter took about 5 years to write
Wow.
and completely research. And like you said, awards that received the Eisner Award, Spanish Haxter Award, the American Library Association Award, and I'm very proud of those. Not just as the storytelling, but also to that is used in education, both at the college all the way down to the grade school level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really glad to hear that because I always think, oh, kids are so bored in school. Why don't they have something more interesting and fun and
Hmm.
educational? So I'm really glad to hear that. Now, have you ever taught about any of the things you've researched on? Because you know so much.
Well, I've done seminars
Okay.
about creating comic books,
Yeah.
and research, of course, is part of the creation, because I believe that good research can only enhance a story. Badly done research will destroy even the best written story. So I try to do as much research as I can, but within reason. I mean, Usagi is a rabbit,
But
so
it's brilliant
it's
that he's a
within
rabbit
reason.
because
Yeah.
he's much more interesting because he's a
Hmm.
rabbit and he interacts with pigs and
Yeah.
rhinos and there's Takage running around all over. I mean,
Hmm.
the reason I actually started to read was maybe about 10 years ago. I had insomnia all the time, and my
Hmm.
husband said, "Oh, you should start reading comic books. Maybe it'll, have something to read at night and have something interesting." And then I just kind of got hooked. But for me, because I got introduced to it, quote unquote, later in life, I only wanted to read arcs that were finished. So I was like,
Hmm.
well, what do you mean I have to wait for a month to read the next issue? I don't understand. So I was only reading, things that were completed.
Hmm.
And I started to kind of run out, not run out, but, I was like, what's
Yeah.
next? And my
Hmm.
friend who owns a comic book store in Boston, it's called Paper Asylum. And he goes, okay, I have the one that's going to be your next read that will keep you going. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, it's going to break your rule because it's ongoing. I was like, oh no, ongoing. And he goes, it takes place in 17th century Japan and it's all about like samurais and stories and folk but the lead character is a rabbit. And I was like, what?
Hmm.
And then, he introduced me to Usagi, and I was hooked from then on. And
Oh,
I've been reading in
wonderful.
order because I'm a little bit
Hmm.
OCD that way. I can't read ahead. I did take a look at Space Usagi just to
Hmm.
kind of get a glimpse, but yes, I'm reading in order. So I've just absolutely loved it. And one of the things I really like being a girl is I'm a little bit of a hopeless romantic, and I love a good, romance story, which you
Hmm.
do kind of tease us with a bit, like with Tomoe and all the other.
Hmm.
Usagi's a bit of a ladies' man, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah.
I actually, speaking of like the cultural part, I really enjoyed that arc with the tea ceremony. That
Oh, yeah.
that was like
Hmm.
not there was like no words spoken,
Hmm.
and it was just really, really beautiful. Would you consider yourself a romantic?
I guess I am, but the romance tradition in Japanese history is that the hero never gets a girl at the end. Very unlike the Western standard. It's
Yes,
like, they're never, it's always unrequited.
it's a bit of tragedy. Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Oh.
But when you mentioned the tea ceremony, yeah, that was a big step because there's no fighting or no action. It's just the tea ceremony from beginning to end. And I remember sending it in, and a few days later, I discovered there was a mistake in one of my pages. So I called up my editor, Diana, and said, "Don't send it to the printer yet. I have to redo a page." And I did it. It was basically I had Usagi bring his swords into the tea house, which is a no-no. So I had to revise where he leaves his swords outside. And I'm always doing corrections like that. Like you said, with the board game Go, it was published as a comic book first, and I played Go as a kid, but I didn't really realize that it wasn't Go. It was another form. It was another game using the same game pieces. And I heard about that mistake from all over the world, from as far away as Germany. But as I said, it first comes out as a comic book, and then it comes out as collected in a trade paperback. And so I was able to correct that by, I went to a Go tournament, bought a book on Go, went to the website of the American Go Masters Association. So I was able to correct that.
Oh, that's
And,
all. That's the only
yeah,
research you did.
well, it's something I just took for granted because I thought I knew, but I just didn't.
Oh, you are so humble. I think it's actually amazing that you are so willing to take so much feedback because you know how being an artist and a storyteller,
Mhm.
everybody has an opinion. I'm sure you've gotten lots of opinions over the years on your character and what you should and shouldn't do. Um, but I find all those aspects really amazing.
Hmm.
The attention to the details, and it does enhance the story. And I thought
Yeah.
that tea ceremony was actually just as intense as
Hmm.
like Katsuichi Sensei versus
Yeah.
Nakamura.
Hmm.
Like it was just as intense, which was really really amazing, actually.
Hmm.
So I
Well,
really
I was
like it.
able to participate in a couple of tea ceremonies, so that really helped. And with one, I asked they encouraged me to ask questions, so I asked a lot of questions, and um, I also found it's very uncomfortable sitting on the floor like that for an hour at a time.
Yeah, but it seems like a very strict tradition,
Yeah, it is.
like very
Hmm.
very ritualistic in
Hmm.
nature. And the tea master stuff comes up later, in which you did actually, I remember, have a like a Nobu tea master, and Usagi wasn't allowed to have a sword, so you had already had that in the
Yeah.
story. But
Hmm.
one of the things with your characters is that you're able to kind of make us fall in love with them immediately. Like I was
Hmm.
immediately drawn to the tea master, and this was only like a few pages, several
Oh yeah.
panels, and
Hmm.
then you killed him, and and I was so sad. But it's kind of amazing that you're able to make us so attached in such a short
Hmm.
amount of time. And then, does it also kind of pain you when you have to say goodbye to these characters?
Uh, yes and no, because some characters are just meant to die. Such as Inazuma, the swordswoman. She was created because I knew that she was going to die, and maybe about 10 years later, she did die. But it took that long, and during that time, everyone, including myself, grew so attached to her. And she was, uh, in my opinion, was the best swordsman in Sagi's world. However, she was created just for that one purpose, and that tea master was also created for that one purpose. And that actually was incident was taken from a actual historical incident in
Really?
Japan where a tea master was ordered to commit seppuku, ritualized suicide, for an imagined affront to the shogun at that time, because for one thing, he built a statue of himself, and the shogun would have to pass under its shadow, things like that. So he was
Um,
ordered to commit seppuku.
yeah.
But that was kind of like the spark of that story.
And there seems like a lot of kind of tragedy in Japanese, or like
Hmm.
sadness, with like the suicide, and then the,
Yeah.
like you said, even the puppets, quote unquote, we imagine in our heads this like comedic thing, and it's very
Yeah.
dramatic. It's such a serious, there's certain parts of the culture that are so serious in its
Yes.
undertones. Do you have any like insight as to why that is, or like what kind of?
I don't know. Like, I'm third generation Japanese American, and Japan is very unlike any other culture in the world. I enjoy going to Japan. I love it there, but it's very different. It's just very subtle things. Even for myself, I can see there's little subtle things, changes or things that are very different from here in the West. A lot of them are good. A lot of them are just weird.
And you were actually, I've had the good fortune of being able to go as well. I think it's a beautiful country. I love the food, and
Yeah. Hmm.
really enjoyed it. But you seem to have traveled several times for this research. But
Hmm.
in addition to visiting
Hmm.
your heritage, like over the past 30 years or so, how have you seen Japan change?
Oh, it's gotten very modern. And I was born in Kyoto actually. My dad was stationed there with the U.S. military after World War II. My mom has such an interesting backstory to her. She was in Nagasaki when the bomb fell.
Really?
And, yeah, and she grew up there, and she told us we learned about her life back then during the wartime. And, she worked in a airplane factory.
Wow.
This is during high school, and but it's just fascinating. She was on the other side of the mountains when the atomic bomb fell, so that protected her.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, but yeah, so the first time I really went back to Japan was in 1999. I was a guest of Osamu Tezuka Studios,
Okay.
and uh, they took us around to various publishers, to animators, and it was great. It was just to meet Western artists, to meet Japanese artists, and it was a great program they had. They unfortunately stopped it right just after my visit, but it was wonderful.
Yeah, and for your mom, did she share with you kind of like what the what it was like at that time for her, being in a
Yeah.
safe area but realizing that so many were not.
Oh, it was. She had a very hard life. Her mom died when my mom was 12 years old, and she was the oldest, so she took over the roles of housekeeping and everything, and things like she didn't know how to cook rice or no, even getting food during the wartime. It was hard. They would eat grass and things like that. And as I said, she worked in an aircraft factory. She would her class would be in charge of the nose cone, building the nose cone. But she once, her and her a group of kids were out there and said, "Oh, look at this one of our planes! They're flying around. Look how beautiful!" And turned around and started shooting at them. And then they realized, oh, it's an American plane,
Wow.
and they were shooting at the kids. So that they things like they had to learn how to go into the mountains, dig holes into the ground, and she would tell us stories about uh, the dead and how they just taken them down to the beach and burned the bodies, and so she grew up with all of that, and to see all that as a teenager, I mean, it's she had an incredibly hard life. She's 92 years old now, so
That's amazing.
yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah.
And so it's interesting because when I went to Nagasaki and you go to the
Hmm.
museums, it feels a little awkward, honestly, as an American in
Hmm.
in that museum, and because it's very
Yeah.
solemn, and of course it was just a terrible time. But for her, also now where does she live?
She lives in Hawaii. Hmm.
Okay, so but I mean, it must have been a interesting dynamic for her though, then to like kind of pretty much be in the American culture, having experienced what she did in Japan with
Yeah.
those hardships.
Well, she married an American.
Yes.
But the curious thing about that is her father, that would be my maternal grandfather, was against her marrying my dad, but not because he was an American and the war had just ended, but more because she was from the samurai class and he was from the peasantry.
Oh,
He came from a line of fishermen,
ah,
so it was still more the classic. This is in the 1940s
wow.
and late 40s. The war had just ended, so it was really, to hear that, it was very, wow. You mean still at that time? It's very eye-opening that they still had those values, that caste system.
Yeah, and just for my reference, can you kind of tell me a little bit about that 17th century Japan class system? Because you do mention it a lot in your
Hmm. I
stories.
do.
Like, oh, he's a samurai, he can't talk to he always, Usagi's always the nice guy. He's always helping the peasants out and the farmers, and they are always so grateful because
Yeah.
he's of samurai class, and
Hmm.
and you can feel that distinguishment of the class system. So what was it like at that time? And like you said, it was
Hmm.
so entrenched. It still
Hmm.
lasted till the 40s.
Well, at that time in 17th century Japan, it's the beginning of the century, and the Tokugawa shogunate had just been established. The age of civil wars had just ended, and I think the Tokugawa shogunate came into power in 1605, and so it was a time of great changes in Japan. Because of the age of peace, suddenly samurai warriors were kind of redundant. I mean, there was no wars, so what use were the warrior class? And so Usagi's part of that class. So he goes on what's called the warrior pilgrimage. It's more to for spiritual enlightening. Other samurai or ronin went into the merchant class because that was a growing class, and or became bandits or just wandered around. Um, so it was a time of changes, and uh, artisans were honored. The merchant class was just rising, as I said, and the lowest class at that time were the kind of like the untouchables, the eta, the bunraku now, and so I make mention of all these various classes. And Usagi is pretty unique in that he transitions, or he flows through all these classes. He interacts with everyone, and I think that's pretty unique for our samurai at that time. But it makes for better stories.
um, you have a lot of bandits in your stories for sure.
Oh
Those
yeah,
those
well,
guys, those guys are everywhere.
they're everywhere. Yeah, they're like cockroaches. But then, as I said, at that time, there were a lot of unemployed warriors, and they had nothing to fall back on. They just knew their swords, and they still had the disdain for the merchant class, which was becoming more powerful. However, the merchant class, they dealt with money, and it was beneath the samurai to actually have to deal with that on a daily basis.
And how did the ninja, play into all of this?
Oh, the ninja! I have basically three ninja clans. I have um, the Neko Ninja, the Cat Ninja, and the Bat Ninja, and I have the Mo Ninja. And they're actually based upon real ninja clans, the Iga, the Koga, and just miscellaneous ones. But yeah, Iga and the Koga were rivals for the um, shogun's patronage,
Ah.
and so that became my Neko Ninja and the Bat Ninjas, and they're just fun.
Yeah, everybody loves ninjas.
Yeah,
Especially in the American culture. Like you
yeah.
saw in the
Hmm.
80s, a lot of ninja movies
Oh
and,
yeah, the Sun Chiba things. Yeah.
definitely. So, I also noticed that I've seen you actually do some of those interviews where you're drawing while you're talking, and you draw
Hmm.
so fast. And I guess it's drawing a character for 35 years, however many hours
Exactly.
a day. But can you draw Usagi with your eyes closed?
I have drawn Usagi with my eyes closed. I have drawn Usagi with upside down, but they're not printable. I mean,
I still think it's amazing. It's really amazing. And what I find amazing too, it's you obviously have a real love for the character, but you never seem tired of him, and you just
oh, I love working with Usagi. I'm also a realist in thinking that I have no other job skills, so I have to work on Usagi.
I find that very hard to believe. There's a lot of anthropomorphic stories out there, and people are probably dying for Stan Sakai to help draw some
Hmm.
animals for them. But do you see like do you put like parts of your personality in Usagi ever, or is it mostly just he's his own
I
character?
I like to think there's part of me in Usagi, so but I don't know. But Usagi seems to be a good guy. Everyone tends to like him, so it might be
Oh,
just me trying to project that into.
no, no. He's very kind, and you also seem very
Uh,
kind. But he, like I said, he's a ladies' man, and he's
mhm,
always doing kind of what he thinks is the right thing. And what I like
mhm.
about your stories too is that, like you said, maybe because of the Japanese theme of it, it's like it doesn't always go well. Sometimes at
Yeah,
the end of it, it's a bit sad or it's a
it
tragedy, and
is.
it's kind of my go-to read because I know it's there and I know I can continue reading it, but sometimes I get a little worried. I'm like, oh, is this going to be a happy episode or a sad episode?
Yeah.
Because,
There
it's not.
have been very tragic episodes. One comes to mind long ago. I did a story called A Mother's Love, in which a mother kind of tricks Usagi into killing her son, who is a really bad guy. And she said, to atone for it, what mother can live with the knowledge that she killed her own son? So you've got to, slay me.
Yes, I
And
remember.
yeah, and Usagi, as a matter of honor for herself and for himself, because he kills all these guys, he does it, and that was um, one story that I thought, oh, is this a bit too much, or but it came out, people enjoyed it. It was a different take on the honor of the samurai, where he actually had to go against honor to retain his honor.
Yeah, and honor is a huge
Yeah,
character trait for samurai, but also I think in the
exactly.
Asian culture in general as well, honor
Yeah,
is so
exactly.
important. And that definitely comes across. And samurai, of course, live by a code.
Hmm.
And Usagi always does the best he can to live to that code. But
Exactly. And it's might not always be the right thing, or he might be hampered because of the code. In fact, I'm writing a story now where the code actually prevents him from doing the right thing.
mhm.
So
Yeah,
it's
it's
yeah.
it's it's pretty fascinating. I'm still kind of amazed. I'm back where you told me, oh, I've got stories in my head for 10 years from now, and
Yeah.
I don't write it down. It's just in my head. I know I've got it.
Well, I know a story that I'm going to do 10 years from now. However, it's next month. That's the problem. It's like, what can I do next month to lead up to that story, you know?
Yes. Did you do formal journalism storytelling, or is that just something that comes very natural for you?
Uh, Comes from a childhood of reading comic books.
See, and those who say, "Oh, comic books aren't, educational," it's
Well, actually, nowadays I very rarely read comic books. I love novels, so I still read every day,
okay. What
but
are what are
mainly novels.
what are some of your
Max
favorite?
Allen Collins is my favorite writer. Max is also a friend. He writes mysteries, and he has a series, the Nate Heller books, and he does a lot of research into his stories, which I really appreciate. Another is the Ed McBain books, the is it 89th or 87th precinct books. Again, a lot of police procedurals, but excellent writers. You can see I kind of tend more towards the mysteries, detective stories right now. For a while, I was into the science fiction, fantasies, but now or for the past 20 years, for the more the adult mysteries or hardboiled detective, that type of thing.
Right, right. I see. And I'm so curious about the actual physical part of the artwork
Hmm.
because you literally do, like I said, I saw you on an artist gallery and you're drawing and you're inking, and I'm like, don't you get a hand cramp? Like, how long does it take you to do an issue?
It takes me 5 weeks to do a complete story from initial idea to the writing to the finished artwork, and that gives me enough time to do other things such as I also do lettering for Serge Aragonés, Grew the Wanderer. I'll do a variant cover here and there or some other projects. So actually, just before you called, I was working on this. This is a
Oh, wow.
it's I'm redrawing uh, an old Usagi cover and but revising it, and this is for another project that I'm doing, and they wanted something with a lot of detail, so I came up with this two-page um, Usagi, Gen, and Tomoe fighting off a horde of zombie samurai in full armor.
It's beautiful. It's
Yeah,
really
thank.
beautiful. And I love the fight sequences, of course, because
Hmm.
they're so dramatic and they're exciting. But there's often Usagi like literally in the middle of a million people all the time. Like
Yeah.
he's always in the middle of the brawl. He finds himself in the middle of the brawl a
Hmm.
lot.
But the fight scenes are the easiest thing to draw. The harder things to write and draw are the quieter events, like walking through the town or just eating it at an inn or something like that. You know,
Really?
that's the harder things.
Why is
Also,
that?
too, uh, just you have to be a bit more disciplined to think a bit more about what the conversation. There's more character development at that time, whereas the action scenes, I mean, it's just them jumping around, swinging swords, and fighting people dying. So it's easiest. That's the easiest to do. So, but it's the quieter moments, the character development moments that are harder to write. When I write, I need quiet. I need complete uninterruption. Whereas when I'm drawing, I can be, I'm watching TV or I'm listening to radio or something, or I can be interrupted by family members. But when I'm writing, I need just absolute quiet. I
Wow.
like to write in planes.
Really?
Because except for a few times when there's an interesting person next to you, you're pretty much left alone. So I just can write a full story there. I can
Ah.
write, and then usually on a trip to somewhere, I'll do uh, an outline of the story. On the way back, I'll thumbnail it. So
Wow.
fortunately, I travel enough so that I can
Yes.
keep on schedule.
Yes, you were on planes quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually have been, I've seen going to a lot of the Comic Cons, and you're
Mm-hmm.
always a guest, and I'm sure you have tons of fans that always are really excited to see you draw Usagi. And are there any particular fun memories you have from any of those interactions with your fans?
Well, there was a woman in Spain ran up to me and said, "Oh, Stan Sakai, it is such a horror to meet you." I think she meant honor, but
Yeah, I'm thinking so. That is funny, and
it
it
is.
must be kind of fun for you though to see like a lot of the cosplayers that dress up as the different
Oh, as
characters.
Usagi, yeah. There are a few at There's always a couple at San Diego Comic Con, and I've been. This will be my 40th Comic Con this year, and
40th?
I'll be 40th San Diego
Wow.
Comic Con, and I'll be one of the special guests this year.
Well, I can't wait. I'm actually going to go this year. So,
Oh,
yes,
wonderful!
it'll be
Well,
my
stop. I have
first
a booth
year.
there.
Oh,
I have a booth there.
oh,
Yeah.
you better believe I'll be stopping by. Yeah, it's my first year going. I've had the ability, I've been able to go the last few years. I just haven't been able to get the time to make it line
Yeah.
up because
Hmm.
I have like the trade pass or whatever, so I can go.
Oh, yeah.
But so I don't have to do the whole like log in and wait in the queue.
Hmm.
Thank goodness.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think this is it. This is the year. I'm definitely going to make
Yeah.
it out there.
Unfortunately, I live in Southern California, so for me, it's a local convention. It's a big convention, but it's still a local
Well, the
convention.
whole city changes. Like
Oh my
it's not
gosh,
even just
yeah.
the convention anymore, isn't it? Just like the
When
entire.
I first started going there, the attendance was I think 6,000, and it was at the or was it 3,000? I think it was six. It was at the old El Cortez Hotel, and you know, I remember you could just sit at poolside with Jack Kirby or talk to Stan Lee. Will Eisner was always there, and it was wonderful.
I bet. Yeah. Now it's just really, really crazy.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
But it is nice to know that um, comics, especially with all the films and everything, is
Hmm.
more. Not I don't want to use the word accepted, but there was a time where comic book geek was a very niche thing. Like you
Hmm.
guys had their your own little group, and now it's almost pretty much mainstream.
Oh, very much so, yeah. And the production values are so high now. Back then, I mean, Adam West's Batman.
Yes, Batman has definitely changed a lot. He's seen
Yes.
a lot of revisions from his leggings to tights.
Hmm. Yes, yes. But since we talked about other media, Usagi has been optioned. It's in development now for a TV series. And hopefully, we'll get Usagi on TV maybe probably next year,
Oh,
hopefully.
that is super exciting.
Yeah.
So will be an animated series.
Animated series with Gamont
Hmm.
Films. Gaumont is the world's oldest film studio. It's in France, so they want to do an international brand. And James Wan, who's flush off his success on
Oh, of
Aquaman,
course.
is involved in the development and
Oh,
everything.
fantastic! I'm looking
Mm.
forward to that. And are you going to be? What is your actual role? You're going to be doing. You're not going to be doing the art for this. Also, I mean,
Oh no, no,
you've got
no!
to do your.
Approval. I'm on in the
Okay.
approval process, so everything gets approved by me because realistically, I just want to do the comic books.
Yes, yes, that's your baby. But
Exactly.
it's literally is it you basically uh birthed Usagi, and so
Hmm.
everything to do with him has been solely yours. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of
Mhm.
other characters don't really belong, quote unquote, like it gets passed around. And
Right.
this
Right.
one,
Right.
it's very personal. So I can imagine that even having the option to do a TV show, people
Hmm.
probably have approached you over the years, and you
Oh yeah.
probably now you're ready.
Done everything from approach with traditional animation to computers to puppets to even live action. So, but hopefully this one really feels good. So
This feels right.
hopefully,
Okay, I think it'll be great.
mhm.
And speaking of the traditional, like you prefer traditional over digital.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a piece of artwork, and I love drawing on paper rather than on the computer. It's just that it's getting rarer and rarer for people to do actual artwork on analog or paper, and so the quality of the paper or the equipment has gone down. It's hard to find good inks. It's hard to find good pens, and the quality of paper has gone down as well.
Yeah, I listened to an interview where you literally drove around and bought all of the pens that
Yeah,
you like and prefer. I'm
yeah,
wondering what happens when those run out.
yeah. These certain pens, it's like it was an old cheap pen. It was like $14, but now and like I said, I have maybe another 20 years supply in the basement, but the closest pen I found that's comparable to this would be like a $400 Pelican,
Oh,
and these are great. They had a great these the Rotring art pens had a great nib to it and had a nice flex to it. So
and I think it's amazing though that they stay like the ink doesn't dry out, like it's still usable for
mhm.
you for the last
Well,
however many.
the inks I have to
Oh, you have to
replenish,
replenish the
and
inks. Okay.
yeah, and I used to use a brand called FW, but then they changed its formula. So I complained to the company, and they said, "Don't pass this around." But the Badger Black Opaque is the old FW formula. So I started using the Badger Black, and then but they changed its formula. So for the past couple of years, I've been looking for a new brand of ink,
Wow.
and I finally found one but it's in Japan. So I order it from Japan about once a year. I order like 2 dozen bottles or so.
Right. I actually find this really interesting parallelism because, here you are doing this intense artwork and you have this very traditional method and you want to use the certain
Hmm.
tools. And I can understand that as a martial artist. I have my weapons that I prefer and I
Yeah.
like,
Hmm.
what I like. But you said it was so hard because, as time goes on, like tradition not that it gets devalued, but it kind of goes by the wayside because new things evolve. And I see that
Yes.
also in Japan with like how they make soy sauce or how they make sake. And I had just watched a TV show on a soy sauce master, and it was so
Hmm.
interesting because like a week later, I read your arc on the soy sauce master, and I was like, this is the same soy sauce master that's there with the wooden barrels and
Yeah.
but there is an interesting parallelism to like that old way which
Hmm.
produced such great amazing quality does
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
diminish over time, and it's kind of a sad thing. And I'm a traditional martial artist, so I really like traditional kung fu, and for
Hmm.
me like I feel kind of rooted in that, and so I kind of see where we all love. I love my iPhone, I'm not gonna lie, I
Hmm.
love all that, but it's a little bit hard to kind of keep and maintain those traditions. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I find that awesome that you are sticking to it and you're like, no, I'm going to keep drawing on paper and with a
Mhm.
pen.
As I said, I like the idea of having a piece of original artwork, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's definitely the way to go, I think,
Hmm.
especially for Usagi. He'd be so confused if he were digitized by you. I don't, or he might have like a breakdown.
Hmm.
um, So I also understand, in addition to the potential TV show that we discussed, you have some really big news for Usagi. He may be going in a color, and there's some new
Hmm.
distribution. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I switched publishers. I am no longer with Dark Horse. Start a full color series beginning in June, and they will pick up on the trade paperbacks from the first IDW issue.
Wow.
Fantagraphics and Dark Horse still have the rights to their black and white series. However, the ongoing color series will be owned by Dark Horse. So, in essence, right now, I'll have three U.S. publishers:
Wow.
Fantagraphics and Dark Horse with the old trade paperbacks, and IDW with the new comics, as well as the ongoing series of trade paperbacks from, I guess it'll be book 34.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. already. So, how does that make you feel knowing that, for 35 years, you've pretty much,
Hmm.
although we get to see Usagi in color on the art, on the cover, and then you've had a
Hmm.
couple that you did like kind of full issue, but
Right.
how's it going to feel to
Well,
see?
actually, Usagi was a color series when
Okay.
it was at Mirage Publishing,
Yes.
and they were 16 issues, I believe, plus a Space Usagi color series.
Right. The
So
Space Usagi.
it's
Yeah. So
been
I know you've
colors.
had a
Yeah.
few,
Uh-huh.
but I mean, this is kind of
Yeah.
a
And
big
the same
change.
colors, Tom Luth is going to color
Oh, great.
the ongoing series. Tom also did the coloring for Namazu, which came out a couple of years ago from IDW.
Okay. Okay, great. So it'll feel very seamless anyway. It'll
Yeah,
just be like the
exactly.
cover art and then you turn the page and then it kind of continues on to that
Yeah.
same feel, which is always nice because we do love that
Mm-hmm.
Usagi feel. But that is definitely very exciting news. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually know a couple comic snobs who are like, "Oh, I don't really like reading in black and white. That's why I haven't started." And I'm like, "Oh, guess what? Now you're going to have to read 35 years of
Mm-hmm.
of Usagi because
Actually, that's why we're switching to color
really
because for a while black and white was in, and nowadays the coloring system or computer coloring has advanced so much that it looks great. And also now readers like to see color in the book. For a
Mhm.
while, black and white was totally fine; it was really accepted. But now you really kind of have to have color. There's not many black and white comics on the stands. There's Walking Dead, and that's about it.
Usagi.
Usagi, yeah, but not anymore.
Yes, yes. Well, I think as an ongoing series, right? Something
Yeah.
so ongoing, I could see how the color definitely would make a difference. I mean, I could
Hmm.
appreciate it in either fashion, honestly. I think it was great.
Yeah.
But you're
Oh,
right.
thank you.
I think as sometimes like as a one-off series or something that's
Hmm.
kind of limited. Like I remember liking Bone a
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
That was in
Hmm.
black and white and it didn't
Yeah.
bother me one bit. I mean, that was just like, kind of like literature almost even, So there was but you're right. As an ongoing series, I could
Hmm.
see why it would appeal to more people and especially younger audiences. I
Yeah,
think like the
exactly.
kids who I think
Hmm.
should be reading Usagi, the younger generation. They could learn so much.
Right, right.
They probably would appeal to like seeing Usagi in color on every
Hmm.
page, not just that front page. So,
Right.
well, that is very exciting news. And when is the first issue of that new series
The
coming out?
first IDW issue comes out in June,
All right.
and also the uh, Saga 8 from uh, Dark Horse comes out in May, I believe. And they'll have the book, Dark Horse will have book 30, I think 33 or
33.
32
Mm-hmm.
of The Hidden. That comes out in June as well.
Oh, so it's a
So a
busy
lot, yeah, busy summer.
busy summer for Usagi.
Hmm.
Well, that is definitely exciting news, and all of our listeners and readers will definitely be looking forward to those releases of both the continuation of
Hmm.
Saga from Dark Horse in May and June, as well as the new issue in. In June from IDW. I
Yes.
know you have a limited time, but I did want to ask you: do you even think about it differently now that it's going to be all in color in terms of the art and the way you draw, or not really?
Not really. When I switched to uh, Mirage, I tried to adapt Usagi into a color,
Hmm.
but I wasn't really satisfied with that. So when it was reprinted in black and white, I redid a lot of the artwork.
Oh,
When I did Namazu, the Ninja Turtle crossover a couple of years ago, I treated it just as if it was a black and white book,
hmm,
and I really liked the results. So I'm treating the IDW series just as I would as if I was drawing a black and white book.
I see.
And I saw the first issue already. Tom's coloring is just incredible. It looks really good. I'm really happy with it.
Well, that's what matters most because,
Hmm.
you are the creator of Usagi Yojimbo. And I know it's very important to you that all the elements are just so meticulous and correct. So
Exactly.
if it doesn't feel right, then it's
Hmm.
definitely not true to who you are. So that is exciting. So I know our
Hmm.
listeners are going to go and snatch those up when they are out. And that's kind of right in
I
time
hope
for,
so.
right in
Hmm.
time for, I know you're traveling a lot with all the cons coming up and
Hmm.
probably promoting this. So that's just right in time for them to, maybe bring one of those issues to you when they see you at San Diego Comic
Exactly.
Con in July.
Hmm. Also, IDW plans to recolor all the Usagi stories, starting from the very first ones,
Wow.
and reissue them as trade paperback, full color. So
Wow.
that's really exciting.
That is exciting. So that means, we can have
It
our
is.
black and white volumes next to our
Mm-hmm.
color volumes, and then just kind of decide if we want to feel vintage about it or step into this
Mm-hmm.
2019 version. That is incredible. And
Right.
I think you're
Well,
right.
it'll take a few years to do
Yes,
that.
yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it won't be ready right away, but it'll be rolling out continuously.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for all of our new readers and who only want to read in color, you can pretty much start that Usagi journey now, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, well, congratulations on that. And I'm excited to take a look at these new issues as well.
Hmm.
And of course, to see you in person with the Usagi Yojimbo comic book.
Well, thank you.
I'd actually like to know what you do for fun.
I read, I travel, I draw. You say you do martial arts. I do archery.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, we have a big enough property where I have a archery range in the backyard, and uh, just a couple of weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, yeah, uh, a person gave me a traditional Japanese bow, and it's about 100 years old. Doesn't have a string to it, but that's I can get that. But yeah, so I want to try that out. But I have a few bows and a target set up in the back.
Oh, that's nice. Is it like very therapeutic for you? Or is it more like sport?
It's just therapeutic, and I've never taken lessons or anything except from a friend who's a teacher of
Hmm.
archery.
How long
So
have you been doing it?
for about 3 years now.
Okay, so, and it gets you outside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, but you just said you draw for fun. That's
Hmm.
that's amazing because you draw for like a living and you draw like intensely for weeks at a time, but yet you still draw for fun. What do you draw when you're drawing for fun?
A lot. I like to do cityscapes when I travel, or like especially in Europe or Japan, you have these cities or buildings with such character because they're so old, and that's something I like to do.
Okay.
I just don't have the time when I travel to actually sit there and do something plein air. Just sit there and draw. However, I'll take photos and then do a drawing later in the hotel room or something.
What are some of your favorite cities that you've gotten to visit?
Well, we were in Barcelona earlier this year, and there's some narrow streets around there. That Barcelona is beautiful. Paris is just great. We're going to Poland in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months, so I've been there before. Krakow is beautiful. Poznan is wonderful, and also going to Budapest. So I like to take in there,
Yeah,
take in there.
all very different architecture. So I'm sure you'll get
Exactly.
some
Yeah.
pretty fun drawings out of that.
Yeah.
And I know I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I've loved talking to you. This has been, absolutely fascinating. But I did wonder, like, my podcast, I talk to kind of a variance of different guests,
Hmm.
and for culture, and sometimes it's about actual culture of where one is from, but this is also comic book culture, and we were talking earlier about the word tradition and how I'm rooted in that, and you have so much that plays into your character of Usagi. And I was wondering for you, what comes to mind when you hear the word tradition, or how do you define it?
Oh, tradition. It's like, well, for myself especially, it's like passing on the culture or the history. I learned it from my mom and my dad, but mainly from my mom because she was rooted in Japanese history and culture, and she loves history. And uh, still reads a lot, and she reads historical novels. So a lot of my stories have come from her. Or if I had a quandary as far as something about Japanese culture history, she's the first person I would go to.
Hmm.
But tradition, it's basically sharing part of yourself to the next generation.
Wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Part of yourself or your families.
Yes, yes. Well, I am definitely looking forward to meeting you in person, but I
Hmm.
love talking to you today on Culture Chat. And I definitely want all our listeners to know they can go to stansakai.com and buy a lot of these prints and issues and memorabilia
Hmm.
and also see you at all these Comic Cons, correct?
Oh, yes.
And
Hmm.
you do signings and you do artwork and stuff there too. So you always have a
Hmm.
booth um, and so definitely check the site because that's where we can get the latest updates. Is that right?
That or Facebook. I have a personal Facebook that I never go on. I don't know why I still haven't,
Me
but
neither.
I also have a professional Facebook that I update all the time.
And
So
that's official Stan Sakai.
is that what it is?
I believe so.
I okay, official Stan Sakai. I think that sounds about right.
Yes, you just log in. It's there when you turn the
It's
computer on.
always there.
It's always
So.
there. So yes, and on that site, you guys, listeners, you could see what he's working on. You could see artwork, and you could see that he bakes muffins in the morning sometimes. And I'd love to taste one of those delicious muffins, by the way, and make some comments, connect with him. He is obviously very personable and very accessible to his fans, which
Mhm.
we all really appreciate. So I'm very relieved actually that I'm still reading your series, knowing that you're still going because you'll always be ahead of me. And my rule's technically not broken because,
Mhm.
I can read your series knowing I'm not going to run out of any
Oh,
to keep me
wonderful.
entertained. Well, Stan, thank you so much for joining me. I don't want to, monopolize all of your time
Mhm.
today. I know you have some drawing and archery perhaps to do. So, but is there anything else you want to share about what's upcoming for Usagi or your work?
Just Usagi's 35th anniversary this year, and we plan to have some surprises, including November is the official 35th anniversary month,
Okay.
so we want to do something special for that.
Oh, I can't wait to hear about it. We'll reconnect before then so we can
Okay.
remind everybody about this big, exciting event. Well, congratulations to you and Usagi on
Hmm.
35 years of incredible artwork and storytelling and just inspiring people all over.
Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure, Mimi.
Thank you, Stan.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Culture Chat and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe and rate my podcast. Feel free to leave me suggestions or send an email to mimi@culturechatpodcast.com or follow me on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.